Good evening, councillors, officers and members of the public in attendance and our viewers live streaming tonight's Planning Committee meeting. I declare this meeting open at 35 minutes past 6. My name is Councillor Julie Williams and I'm the Mayor of Darebin City Council, and I'm also the chairperson for tonight's meeting. It is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's planning meeting, as this meeting is being scheduled also online, and you are more than welcome to watch it and view it later. I firstly would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri, the Warrawong people on the land that we gather here this evening, and pay our respects to elders past and present and their continuing connection to the land, water and culture. I will introduce you to our councillors here this evening. I have Councillor Hannan, Councillor Newton, our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Rennie, I have Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Messina and Councillor Greco. I have an apology from Councillor Demetriadis and Councillor Lawrence. This evening I have Vanessa, our General Manager from City Sustainability and Strategy, Catherine, our Manager City Development, Matthew, our Coordinator Statutory Planning, and we have Jackie from Principal Planner and Paul, which is our Senior Statutory Planner. Thank you. Do we have any disclosures of conflicts of interest to our officers or councillors? If not, thank you. Can I kindly ask councillors if I please have a mover for the adoption of the minutes from the Planning Committee that was held on the 10th of July 2023. Do I have a mover and a seconder? I have a mover, Councillor Greco, seconder, Councillor Rennie. All those in favour? And that has been voted on unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, I'll just move in straight into question time. So I believe that we will have our items that will come up. We'll ask our officers if they would like to present the item, and we have the chance to ask questions, and then we'll go from there. Then we'll ask anybody who would like to speak on the item. Firstly, the first consideration we have this evening is the application for planning permit for 23 James Street, Preston. Over to our officers.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Good evening, everyone. This is an application regarding a medium density housing development comprising 2 double-storey dwellings at 23 James Street, Preston. Each dwelling will have 3 bedrooms, 2 car spaces and over 70 square metres of private open space. The development includes a double garage which is located to the rear of the site and accessed from the rear laneway. Above the garage is a loft which has an ensuite and storage space. The subject site has an overall area of 420 square metres. A fall exists across the land, sloping from the front to the rear. The site is zoned General Residential Schedule 2 and is located on the western side of James Street. Directly to the front of the site is the James Street pop-up park and traffic pinch point. This is a council initiative which promotes the reprioritisation of road safety and reduction of vehicle speeds. The application received 6 objections on the key grounds of car parking impacts associated with increased use of the rear laneway, use of the garage and loft as a dwelling, and visual bulk created by the first floor loft. The proposed development is generally compliant with objectives of Clause 55 of the Darebin Planning Scheme, subject to minor variations. The proposed development has broad policy support under both state and local planning policy provisions and appropriately responds to the preferred neighbourhood character. The proposal is considered an acceptable development that will provide 2 family-sized homes to this area of Preston, which is well served by the Preston Market, public transport, schools and parks. Accordingly, it is recommended to support the proposal and issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. To our councillors, do you have any questions in reference to this item? Councillor Hannan.
Thank you, Mayor. A question on one of the objections was in relation to overshadowing. I was just trying to work out the sort of difference between the current degree of overshadowing and what would be the case if the proposal was accepted and the development was built. wondering if staff could comment on the just the comparison between the current levels of overshadowing and overshadowing under the proposed development, please. Thank you.
Thank you to our officers.
Thank you for the question through you, Mayor. In relation to overshadowing impacts to the southern adjoining property, the extra level of overshadowing created by the proposed development will be minimal beyond the shadow cast by the existing fence. The area of secluded private open space for that southern property is actually located to the south of their existing veranda, so there won't actually be any additional overshadowing impacts to their primary area of secluded private open space. Does that answer? Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Messina.
Sorry, Mayor, through you. Generally speaking, we ask questions after the objectors or applicants have submitted. Are we able to ask after those presentations?
No, the way the agenda's written here is that we ask our officers that we can at the moment, and we do have our submitters straight after that. You can ask if you want.
Because generally speaking, we do ask after the submitters and the objectors.
I'm more than happy to take questions after the submitters also, if that's the case.
Because it's generally
so that's not a problem.
Thank you.
Councillors, are there any other questions? Thank you. If there are no further questions, we do move to hearing about two submissions that we have this evening to address the Planning Committee tonight. The first one I have is Abraham. Is Abraham here? Yes? Abraham, would you like to step up and speak? You have 3 minutes to speak on this item. You do not wish to speak? Okay. The second person I have this evening is Matthew. Is Matthew here? Matthew, you're more than welcome to just step up. Just state your name and your suburb, and you have 3 minutes.
Goodness. Matthew Burke, I'm a resident of Preston, of James Street, actually quite close to this proposed development. Look, I was one of the objectors to submit a formal objection to council many months ago. I touched on a lot of components of my objection then. Tonight, because I've been limited to 3 minutes, I'll speak of only two, and I guess they represent the two substantial objections, not just that I have, but many of the residents of the proximity have as well. And it's the second story on the rear building has been something that has been the cause of quite a bit of consternation in the neighbourhood, and that's because of the visual bulk that was mentioned here earlier. Councillor Hannan, you asked a question about overshadowing for the southern property, and that question's been asked many times on the street. The planner gave a response which said there's minimal impact. It's hard to understand. It's certainly hard for my elderly Greek neighbour Elpida, who couldn't be here tonight because she's in Greece in her ancestral village. She has been harvesting vegetables from her yard for many, many years. She is deeply concerned about the impact that this very large, almost unprecedented and unnecessary two-storey rear building will have on her
You have 1 minute
home.
and 20 seconds left.
Thank you. And also the fears of these two-storey garages to be used as an additional dwelling. There's plumbing there. We know that can easily be turned into an additional illegal dwelling. I know, Council, that this is a concern that you have for many dwellings in the municipality. We don't want to open up another two potential illegal dwellings here. The second component of my objection that I'll speak to tonight is about the right-of-way. Yes, there are swept diagrams that say that you can get 4 vehicles in there. I find that very hard to believe because I've got the luxury of a turning recess and I've already had a few prangs coming in and out of there. This garage won't have that luxury. I think the developers will advertise this as double-storey garages. It'll take about 24 hours for the new occupants to realise that you can't get 2 cars in there. Where will the cars go? On the street. That is a real concern for the neighbourhood. I'd ask council to consider, if they're not willing to knock off the 2-storey rear building, consider restrictive covenants like section 173. The developers have given us every assurance that those rear buildings aren't to be used as a dwelling and could not possibly be used as a dwelling. Well, if that's the case, I don't expect them to stand in the way of extra legal protections being put in place to give some peace of mind to residents that we're not going to have 2 illegal dwellings on James Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. I did allow you extra time. Now, councillors, do you have any questions at this point in time? Councillor Messina?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I've got 2 questions.
Hang on. Matthew, the questions will not be directed to you, so you'll please sit down. Thank you very much for your
Questions to
submission.
the officers, through you, Mayor. I want to, first of all, I'm just wondering if there's can you explain the turning points in terms of the right-of-way? Very popular at the moment, SUV vehicles. Is there any way that an SUV vehicle can actually go into the garage area, into the exit of the home, number one, and number 2, what vehicles did we do the scenario on, please? What size vehicle?
Thank you for the question, through you, Mayor. The swept path assessment that was submitted with the application is based on a B85 percentile vehicle, which is a general vehicle that we assess it under. I think it's one of the larger ones, is my understanding. The internal width of the garage is also wider than the standard in the Darebin planning scheme. So generally the scheme asks for 5.5 metres wide and the internal width is 5.9 metres. There's also a 1.2 metre setback of that garage from the rear right of way. So they have 4.2 metres to swing in, and then that extra width internally of the garage allows them to have that swing motion. The swept path assessment was assessed by Council's Transport Unit and they supported the swept path assessment and deemed it satisfactory.
Thank you. And my supplementary question, through you, Mayor, is in relation to precedents in the area, are there any other homes that have that sort of dwelling in the area in terms of the size, in terms of the loft in the garage? In the area.
Yeah, this is something we have looked into. Thank you for the question, Councillor. This area doesn't have a great deal of infill medium density development, but the controls applicable to the area don't discourage it. Sort of further from the subject site beyond a radius of about 200 metres, there are some examples of medium density development, but in the immediate vicinity of the site, no, this would be one of the first.
Thank you. I'm very familiar with the area. Just in relation, through you, a supplementary question, another one, Mayor, is there precedence that's been undertaken, generally speaking, when it comes to assessing planning applications in general?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Through you, Mayor, if I'm understanding the question correctly around precedence, we have to assess each and every application on their own merits. So in this instance, we're assessing this proposal against the zone and overlay controls relevant to the site. So precedence as such is not something that has been taken into account here. As I've mentioned, in the immediate surrounds of the site, this would be one of the first medium density developments in the immediate area, but we have to assess it against the controls at hand, which we have done.
My question, are you finished? Yep. My question is, in order to get the residents' peace of mind, in the assessment side of things, the concern of the loft being converted into a kitchen at a later date, does council do on-site inspections, or if it's sold later down the track as a kitchen, and what are the consequences or something like that? Is there something that's followed up?
Thank you for the question. So proactive planning enforcement is not something we are particularly well resourced to do, but were the garages to the rear of the dwellings converted into second or third dwellings, in this case, planning enforcement would be undertaken. So there is no approval to proposed to be granted for multiple other dwellings on this lot. If they were converted, planning enforcement action would be undertaken to ensure that they're not used in that manner.
Thank you. Over to you, councillors.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to put forward a refusal motion that's been circulated.
An alternative motion. Can we kindly have those wordings put up on our screen? I believe that's been circulated. Councillor Newton, is that your alternative motion?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder on that one? Councillor Messina. Councillor Newton, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. So I think when you first look at this application, it looks okay. So what it looks like is 2 3-bedroom townhouses, reasonable for the area. But then you see the 2 double garages with the 2 lofts above. And in my mind, what I see is not 2 dwellings, but potentially 4. So I have met with the neighbours. I've met with Elpida and Matthew and neighbours from James Street about this issue. I've seen the site. And my concern, which is shared by neighbours, is that what could happen with the loft is that it could be rented out or it could become an Airbnb. I do think there's potential to put in a kitchen at a later stage. The other concern is around the right-of-way at the back. So I've lived in an apartment building with a stacker at the back where it had a narrow laneway that we drove in and out of, and I absolutely hated driving into that car park. It was okay if there was just 1 car, but if there was 2, it was too hard. So I just didn't use it. So I know very well, even if a laneway might meet minimum standards, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to work in practice. And I think we've seen that across the municipality. And I think just because something meets the minimum standards of a planning application, I don't think that means that it's an ideal outcome. And I have seen exactly what this laneway looks like. I think it's pretty narrow. So I also think that with the neighbour to the south, the risk to her veggie garden being overshadowed is real, and I know that she is concerned about. So for me, although I think it appears like a pretty decent application in many ways, the concern about the 2 lofts is too big for me to support it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Councillor Messina.
I'd just like to echo what Councillor Newton has indicated. For me, it's the 4 dwellings that's a concern, and the potential for Airbnb. Not that I'm against Airbnb, but when you use your existing home to expand that footprint for that sole purpose, and that's what I'm seeing here. The veggie garden also, having a Greek old lady live there for many, many decades and growing her vegetable garden, and how much pride that brings her. And I can assure you her life will change if she's got no veggie garden, if she comes from that particular background. But I urge, moving forward, that everybody get a copy of the age, because amongst all the noise of the Matildas, you're going to have a new planning scheme that's going to take away your right for planning applications to come to a council to make a decision. That's where the noise should be, but it's been dwindled and hidden in the noise of the Matildas. So I urge everybody who's listening to go and get the copy of the age and read up about what's going to happen to planning.
Thank you, councillors. I'll put that item to vote. So what we're voting on is the alternative motion that's up on the screen. All those in favour? I have Councillor Rennie, Councillor Newton, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Messina, Councillor Greco and Councillor Williams. All against? Councillor Hannan. That item has been will be issued a refusal to grant of a planning permit. The Planning Committee has decided not to support the application and an issue of refusal to the grant a planning permit on those grounds. The applicant and objectors will be notified in writing. The applicant can appeal the decision at VCAT. The process of the appeal is subject to timeframes detailed on the documentation. Thank you. We'll move over to the next item this evening. I believe it's Jenkins, isn't it? The next item we have this evening is number 26 Jenkins Street, Northcote. Thank you. Over to our officers.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors. This is a proposal to construct 2 double-storey dwellings at 26 Jenkins Street in Northcote. Each dwelling features 5 bedrooms, ground floor secluded private open space, and 3 on-site car parking spaces, each provided in separate basements, which are accessed via 2 separate crossovers to Jenkins Street. The subject site is zoned Neighbourhood Residential Zone Schedule 1, and 17 objections were received against this application on the key grounds of inconsistency with the minimal housing change designation, inconsistency with neighbourhood character, overshadowing impacts including impact to neighbouring solar panels, overlooking impacts and pedestrian and vehicle safety concerns related to the proposed basement car parks. The development provides on-site car parking in accordance with clause 5206 of the Darebin planning scheme, and for that reason is supported by Council's Transport Engineering Unit. The proposal complies with all objectives and standards of clause 55 of the planning scheme and appropriately responds to the preferred neighbourhood character guidelines and the minimal housing change designation in providing a high quality architectural response, which is supported by Council's city designer, and that allows a more efficient use of a large land parcel in a well-located and well-serviced area. I would just like to formally acknowledge a clerical error in the agenda circulated, so on page 59 of that report. 12 Jenkins Street is a neighbouring site that has been incorrectly described as featuring 2 double-storey dwellings. Our correction here is to note that it features 1 double-storey dwelling to the front of the site and 1 single-storey dwelling to the rear. And just to note that this clarification does not impact our assessment or our officer recommendation in this instance. So finally, it's recommended to support this proposal and issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions in reference to this item?
I do,
Councillor Messina.
but I'd like to hear from objectors or applicants first. But my question's around the solar panels, but I'll wait for the applicants or objectors to speak.
We have 1 applicant to speak and 6 objectors. Normally in the past we don't have as many objectors, and apparently I don't know what you were told and how many minutes you were asked to speak. Did anybody, for those who are speaking this evening, 2 minutes? You were told 2 minutes. So you've all got 2 minutes each? So I'm a little confused with the running sheet that I have because it's very different to what I'm normally used to. However, as I said, I've got 6 objectors. I'm going to give you 2 minutes each. I don't normally, because normally you have a total of, I think it's 5. However, because you've got 6 of you, what I would like to aim for, instead of having repeating information, if you can add anything new to the situation would be great, rather than repeating the same thing. So I'll first, because this is how we do it, we go to the applicant first. So if the applicant would like to come up, you have 3 minutes to speak. So I'll give you 3 minutes and everybody else can get 2 minutes each.
Hi everyone, my name's David from Sync Architecture. The immediate neighbourhood characteristics include a mixture of architectural styles with some infill development, including medium to high density examples. This includes 5 separate apartment buildings located directly to the south of the site. The subject site is one of the largest properties in the street, consisting of a site area of 825 square metres, with a wider street frontage of around 18.3. The majority of the properties in the street are made up of sites closer to half the width of this site, averaging closer to 10 metres in width. The immediate area has experienced a formal heritage study in, I believe, 2018, or that's when the heritage policy was issued, and local council subsequently did not select the property to be protected by formal heritage overlay, unlike some of the other properties in the street. Therefore, given the size of the site and the wider street frontage, the site is well suited to the development of a side-by-side development. In accordance with the preferred character statement of Precinct A2, the proposed garages are being located underground to minimise dominance of garages, increase street activation. Generous side setbacks have been provided at both ground and first floor level to continue the same rhythm of in the streetscape. The design response to the facade was treated in a contemporary yet respectful manner with no use of mock heritage design. The project also complies with the standard in relation to minimal housing change, in that the application seeks to change the site from 1 dwelling to 2. The application is highly compliant with Res Code and seeks to achieve full compliance with in the intent to limit any amenity impact to the adjoining neighbours. This includes full compliance with side and rear setbacks, front setback, site coverage, permeability, garden space areas, car parking, overshadowing and overlooking. The project has also been strategically designed around the retention and protection of 2 substantial trees on the site, which have only helped to screen the built form between neighbours. To finish, the architecture of the project provides a sculptural beauty to the building form. The use of high-quality building materials and articulation help to set precedents for new standard of housing in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Objectors, first up I have Arch. Is Arch in the gallery? Arch, would you like to go first, or did you want somebody else to go first? You certainly have. I'll read out the names I have. I have Arch, Neil, Janet, Simon, Judy and Katrina.
Good evening, councillors.
Can you kindly just state your name and your suburb then?
Thank you. My name is Katerina Stakos and
Thank
I'm
you.
at 25 Jenkins Street, Northcote. I'm located directly opposite the development site, and I thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. I have viewed the development proposal and I've informed myself of Council's policy platform. I am of the view that the proposal does not comply with Council's development vision as outlined in the Darebin planning scheme. As you are aware, Council's MSS and neighbourhood character policy, they establish the strategic framework for the consideration of planning permit applications, and they give policy direction to all stakeholders, property owners and developers alike. The strategic framework gives certainty to property owners like us here tonight. Jenkins Street between Wales Street and St David Street is in a neighbourhood residential zone and minimum change area. The area, Jenkins Street, I'm not referring to Christmas Street, which has a different flavour, an emerging flavour, but Jenkins Street is predominantly detached, low-scale, single-storey dwellings on individual lots. It has strong Victorian and Edwardian era architectural character with timber or brick cladding, front verandas, pitched or hip roof forms, generous front, side and rear setbacks, landscaped front and rear gardens and single driveways. That's the character of the street. With respect, the proposed development does not respect the existing period architecture nor the preferred neighbourhood character of this minimum change area, and it makes no attempt to provide any feature that interprets elements of the existing streetscape without going into mock architecture. Councillors, the proposed dual occupancy may well be a grand and modern architectural proposal that meets Clause 55 and state government policy guidelines, but it does not fit in to the existing neighbourhood character, and it certainly does not comply with Council's policy platform as it currently stands. If Council is of a mind to encourage such development, it should first amend the Darebin planning scheme to reflect its revised development aspirations.
Your time's up.
I thank you, in conclusion, for your time and your consideration. Thank you.
I'm in your hands. Who would like to go next then? Arch, yep. Neil, sorry.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Neil and Narita Morehouse from 28 Jenkins Street, Northcote, owners for 32 years. Everyone in the street has had to follow council planning guidelines for an area of minimal change when renovating or building. This has created a unique streetscape honouring the style and heritage of the majority single-storey Victorian and Edwardian homes while maintaining private open spaces in our yards. There are only a few double-storey homes in this part of Jenkins Street, and there are no double-storey dual occupancies. Diagram 1 I've circulated shows the site coverage and enormous bulk of the proposed development, which is way out of proportion with every existing dwelling in the street. The council's own guideline clearly states, avoid buildings that are out of scale with adjoining buildings or that appear to dominate the streetscape. The driveways and 2 double-width garages are the dominant features of both front yards and expose the true 3-storey facades of both buildings. Both driveways are very steep with no ability to turn around, requiring reversing out at speed to exit the property. This, we believe, will create a real and frequent pedestrian risk. The eastern driveway will also need to be moved away from the eastern boundary to accommodate the visibility splays from the planning report. Diagram 2 circulated shows the scale and bulk of the development against our home profile, showing the overwhelming size and length of the development and the looming intrusion of the building over our personal outdoor space. We're also very concerned about the impact of the development on the shading of our solar panels. We urge you as the custodians of this unique streetscape and housing history to deny this development application. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Neil. Who would like to go next?
My name is Simon. I'm a resident of 22 Jenkins Street, Northcote, the western boundary of the proposed development. I'd like to reiterate what Katarina and Neil have both said. Our home is 100 years old. I've lived there for 35 years. Myself and my neighbours have renovated our properties and kept the character of the street. We've added bedrooms and living rooms and still kept the character of the street. This proposed development is an overbearing building that will dominate my house. It extends almost the length of the block. It will destroy the character of the street. It has 10 bedrooms, 2 pools, 2 underground car parks. These structures will severely increase noise, lights, shadowing and traffic to our house and street. At 22 Jenkins Street, we also object strongly to the orientation of the proposed western-facing building. It has an alfresco area and a pool that will be close to and facing our property. The building behind will channel all the sound towards us. It will act like an amphitheatre. Such a structure should be like a courtyard that contains itself within its own boundaries, but we will be dealing with all the noise, all the lights from that structure. We also object to the size of the property facing west. There is going to be an air conditioning unit close to our main bedroom that will presumably be running 24 hours a day. We object to that. It will destroy our rest and sleep. Without taking up any more time, I'd just like to say I agree with the previous speakers. This proposal should not be allowed to go ahead. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Simon. Next objector.
Thank you. Arch Cuthbertson from Jenkins Street, Northcote. Thanks for the invitation to speak tonight. As a concerned nearby resident of the proposed development, 26 Jenkins Street, I strongly disapprove of the demolition of the existing property and the redevelopment of planning proposal. What attracted us to our Jenkins Street property over 20 years ago was the abundance of surrounding historical homes of the early era. Also the elevation and the amount of natural light and visible skyline that is typical of this low-density early architecture. The Jenkins Street precinct between Wales and St David Street is unique due to its historical significance, as demonstrated by the majority of intact examples of historic weatherboard and brick Edwardian and Victorian period homes. One fine example is 26 Jenkins Street. This proposed development does not reflect the character of Jenkins Street, does not reflect or respect the character of any other properties in the neighbourhood precinct, and the design, size and the bulk of this proposed development does not interact with any of the existing architecture of the surrounding neighbourhood. All other surrounding residential properties have generous front and rear setbacks, and this proposal does not address these considerations. As demonstrated in the amount of objections and concerns to this proposed development, Jenkins Street residents are a passionate and close community who value the existing streetscape whilst maintaining the heritage of Northcote for future generations. To end on a positive note, I applaud Darebin Council for the Thornbury Park Estate Precinct initiative to apply a permanent heritage overlay to that large residential region. Should a similar planning initiative be applied to the many architecturally significant buildings of this region of Northcote, I believe Council will attract overwhelming support from many residents and ratepayers. I strongly recommend that Council overturn this development application tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Arch.
Yeah, I live at number 20 Jenkins Street, 2 doors down. As people have said, the western part of our street is predominantly made up of lovely Victorian Edwardian homes. They're charming and they're characteristic. It's a lovely spot to live. I believe we live in the 10% of Darebin that is still categorised as a minimal change area. And I don't believe this new development fits into that idea of minimal change. People have said that we've all renovated our homes, the ones that have been here long enough, and we've all tried to fit in with the rest of the street. We've tried to keep that look of Victorian Edwardian and often restricted the sizes of our homes to do so to benefit our neighbours. One thing I'm concerned about is we have some beautiful large blocks and large houses still on the opposite side of the street, and the demolishment of this one at number 26 would lead to further developers coming in and demolishing those homes. It sets a huge precedent. I'm also concerned about the prospect of having huge 2-storey buildings that dominate the entire block, the fact that that would discourage current home owners from installing solar panels. We have a push towards converting from gas to electricity, and we're concerned as homeowners about where we would place panels if someone can come in next to us and put in a 2-storey building that cuts off our supply. Also concerned about the lack of privacy. We live next to 3 single-storey units, and we have less privacy in our backyard just because of having people living alongside us. I think having nice backyards where we can relax and enjoy our outdoor space is important. So thank you for hearing me, and I hope you also deny the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. And I've just been looking on the internet and seeing all the different homes in your street. But yes, I can see that there's bigger sites on the other side. Next objector.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Janet. I've lived at 43 Jenkins Street for nearly 25 years now. I've read the submission by the Senior Statutory Planner who supports the granting of the planning permit for the development. We clearly reach different conclusions about whether such a permit should be granted, but there's actually quite a lot of facts and information that we agree on. What we don't debate is that according to the Strategic Housing Framework Plan, we're in a nominated minimal change area. What that means, and what everybody knows, is that there's a minimal capacity for residential development. The plan specifies that a modest level of development is possible that respects the type, the scale, and the character of the area. We also agree, it's actually stated in the Council's submission, that the predominant architecture, low density, single storey, Victorian Edwardian dwellings, constructed of brick or weatherboard, hipped roofs, large lots with significant front and rear gardens. We agree that's in the Council submission. It's all there, we agree. Even where there's been medium density dwelling developments in the area, they've been modest. They're mostly single storey. There is, as we've said, there's nothing that reflects this scale of development. But the plans for the construction at 26 Jenkins Street are none of these things. It's not modest by any stretch of the imagination. It's not low density. It's not single storey. It has 2 levels with the top storey jutting out beyond the level of the lower storey. Nothing else in the street has that. It's not reflective of Victorian or Edwardian architecture. It's not brick. It's not weatherboard. It in fact has a flat roof and textured rendered facade. It does not have significant front and rear space. It does not respect its neighbours.
Thank you. Your time's up.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope that you will not support this proposal.
Thank you. Next objector this evening. I think we've done them all now. Thank you. Councillors, over to you. Do you have any questions to our officers? And thank you all to our objectors and the applicant this evening. Councillor Messina.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'd like to ask about the statement in relation to the solar panels on number 28, I think, Jenkins Street, please. I'm looking at a visual here online. How much of those solar panels will actually be obstructed in terms of size, a third, half? Because I'm just curious.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mayor. The assessment that we undertake in relation to solar panels and the impact on them under the energy efficiency standard directs us to look at overshadowing diagrams onto those panels at the equinox. We've received those plans in our assessment and reviewed them. In terms of the overshadowing impact within the time period that we look at, which is between 9 and 3 p.m. at the equinox, the shadowing impact will start to occur only later in the day, after 3 p.m. We look generally at 9 to 3 p.m. Notwithstanding that, there is, the plans do show that there would be some minor impact from 4 p.m, a small amount of impact. My colleague is just scrolling to that plan for me. To put a figure on it, I would say, yeah, it's a very small amount of overshadowing from 4 p.m. at the equinox.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillors, any further questions? If there are no further questions, Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I have an alternate motion prepared, which I'll ask the team to put on screen, please.
Thank you. Is that your alternative motion?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Councillor Messina is seconder. That's okay. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking both the applicant and objectors for coming along tonight. It's been, I think, very useful for this planning committee to hear from you all. This is a motion to refuse the planning permit, and I think there are two key grounds. One is the neighbourhood character ground, and I think it's not often we have so many objectors coming to speak to us, and it speaks volumes to the way in which people in this street consider neighbourhood character. And I think even the applicant, in pointing to apartment buildings which are actually not in Jenkins Street but in Christmas Street to the south, as a reflection of where there's different built form, actually just reinforces the fact that this type of built form, this higher and bulkier built form, is not something that's seen in Jenkins Street. And this is recognised by this being a minimal change area. So I think it's really important that where we have this kind of character that we protect it, and it's one of the reasons why higher built form and high density development is increasingly encouraged along major transport corridors, so that we can allow development and allow higher density development whilst also protecting what is important about our neighbourhoods. I'd also like to consider the issue of solar panels, noting that the assessments relate to the equinox. That's in September or March. And in fact, when do we want our solar panels to be most effective? When do they cushion us against excessive electricity bills? In the middle of winter. At this time of year, when it gets to 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you want to put your heating on. We don't even do those assessments. And yet I think that our residents have a reasonable expectation that if they invest thousands of dollars in making their home more energy efficient, in responding to the climate emergency, that we will do everything in our power to protect that solar access and to make sure that it's there at the time when it should be there. It's not enough to rely on state planning regulations that take the equinox as the time we look at for overshadowing. And I think this is a principle that we should advocate for really fiercely and hold very dear. In relation to the development itself, you know, hats off to the architect. I think it's actually, it would be a beautiful development in another location. And I think that's the really important thing. This is the wrong location for that development. There's no doubt there's scope for family homes, and there are blocks in Darebin that would accommodate this type of home. But this street is the wrong street, and the fact that residents in this street, in this neighbourhood, have so diligently maintained, repaired, extended and renovated their homes in a respectful way that reflected that neighbourhood character speaks volumes to why we should refuse the planning application tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Messina.
Thank you. So eloquently put, Councillor Rennie. I think what stands out for me is neighbourhood character and location. I don't think this is the right location for that development. I am curious as to what happens in the future in relation to how much of the Christmas Street properties are going to impinge should it not be successful here tonight and it goes to VCAT. So I will be following it because we don't want streets of Darebin to not reflect the neighbourhood character because there's so much little of it left. So I'm curious to see what happens should it not go ahead tonight in terms of in favour of the application. So I look forward to it, and thank you for coming this evening. And I'm just having a look at your houses on the street and how you've actually extended the footprint rather than going up. And as Councillor Rennie said, the developer did eloquently put forward a development, but not for this street.
Councillors, I'll put that item to vote. All those in favour? That is being carried unanimously. The Planning Committee has decided not to support the application and has issued a refusal to grant a planning permit on the grounds. The applicant and objectors will be notified in writing. The applicant can appeal the decision at VCAT. The process of the appeal is subject to timeframes detailed on the documentation. So thank you all this evening for coming. Councillors, other business we have this evening, we have a general planning information schedule for VCAT applicants' applications. Councillors, do I have a mover on this item? Councillor Rennie, do I have a seconder? Councillor McCarthy. I'll put that item to vote. All those in favour? And that's been carried unanimously. Consideration of reports considered confidential. We do not have any confidential matters this evening, so I'll be closing this meeting at 7:26. Thank you very much for all those who have come to